In this video, I want to talk about substrings, or how to extract parts of a string. Now, indexing in Python starts at the number 0. So for example, in this string that we have here, that is in this variable called myString, this first letter in Python, this P, is at the 0th index. Okay. And right after P we have Y, and that is at the first index. T is at the second index, H is at the third index, and so on and so forth, all the way to the end. And in this case, spaces also count as well. So in this case, 0 is P, 1 is Y, 2 is T, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is the space, and 7 is I, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's how indexing works in Python. And if we wanted to get a single character in a string, right? For example, in this string, let's say we want to get the first letter. And in this case, we know the first letter is P, but how do we get that using Python syntax? So one way to do it is to extract that letter or character using the square brackets. And in order to use the square brackets, we have to specify what variable that string is stored in. In this case, we know Python is awesome is stored in the variable called myString. So we'd have to say myString, and then using the square brackets, the position of the character that we want. In this case, we want the letter P, and we know P is at the 0th index of this string. So we put 0 inside of the brackets and then close brackets. So myString at the 0th index is what this syntax means. Now we can set this equal to another variable, or we could just print it to see what the output would be. So let's go ahead and see what happens if we print this out. We get P, just like how we predicted. We can also store this in another variable called first letter. It's a descriptive name, and then we can say print first letter. And if we run this, we get the same thing. Okay, so you can store it in a variable first and then print it, or you can just print it straight off the bat. And next we're going to be looking at the negative indexing. How do we get the negative indexes? So for example, in this string Python is awesome, let's say I want the last character of this string, which in this case is an exclamation point. How do we get that? So we know that we begin with the 0th index, and we can actually go starting from the back using negative indexes. So for example, all I have to say is print, then myString, which is the variable that I have the string inside, and the index. In this case, if we're going to be using negative indexing, let's go ahead and see what -1 would give us. If we use -1, we get the exclamation point. So this shows that using negative indexes, we begin at the end of a string. Right? Rather than starting from the beginning, using a minus sign inside of our square brackets, we can get the last character in our string. Now, what if we want to extract just Python from the string, the word Python? How do we do that? Using substrings, we can actually specify a start and a stop position inside of these square brackets. So earlier, we used just a single index for inside of the square brackets, and that would give us just one character from the string. We can also use 2 different positions separated by this colon to get a sequence of characters from that string. So in this case, if I wanted just the Python word from my string, I would say print myString, and then inside of these square brackets, we need a start position or starting index and a stop position or stop index. In this case, we know Python starts at the 0th index, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we know it ends at the 5th index. Let's go ahead and write that here. So start at the 0th index and end at the 5th index. Now something to be careful about in Python is that the stop index will always give you -1 of the stop position, meaning that if I started from 0 and I wanted to go all the way to 5, if I specify that inside of the square brackets, there's actually an issue that occurs. Let's go ahead and see what that issue is. In this case, we just get Python without the n, right? So 0 to 5 will only give you pytho. So notice that in this case, the stop, you always have to add 1. Okay, so if you want Python with the n, you need to add 1 more to your stop position. So this brings about an important part in substring notation, is that the stop does not include that index in your string. So in this case, we have 0 all the way to 6, but not including the 6th index. Okay. And when we try to run this, we get Python. So when we're using substrings, you always count the start, but you do not include the stop position. What if we wanted to extract just a certain character all the way till the end? So for example, let's say I want from the 2nd index and all the way to the end. So thon end is awesome. If I just want to ignore py, and if I wanted to start at the letter T and go all the way to the end, how do I specify that using Python? So there's a shortcut when we're using substring notation. So you can say my string, and then you do not have to specify a start index. You can just leave it blank. And if you also leave the stop index blank and just do it like this, you should be able to get the entire string. And now if you wanted to skip the first 2 letters, 0 and 1, right? These are the first 2 indexes, and 0, 1, 2. So you want to start at 2, the 2nd index all the way till the end, so you would write 2 here in the start position. Now if you run this, we get thon is awesome. So in this way, you can see that there's a short way to write all the way to the end, and the way we specify that is using just a colon and nothing after it. So in this case, it does not stop, it stops all the way when it reaches the end of your string. There's also another part of a substring that we call the step, and the step allows you to skip certain characters in your string. So for example, if I wanted every other letter in this string called my string, then I can use the step index. And so I can start at a certain position, go all the way to the end, and using a step of 2, that would give me every other character. And let's see how the step works. Say print my string, starting from the beginning, going all the way to the end, and remember that all the way to the end we can specify it with just leaving it blank. Let's say I want with a step of 2. See what happens. Now I get every other letter. So P, and then skip Y, have T, skip H, O, and then skip N, keep the space, and then skip I, and keep the S, and so on and so forth. So when we use a step of 2, you're keeping the first character, you're skipping the second one, keep that first character, skip the second one, keep the first character, and skip the second one. So that's exactly what it means. Now if we put 3, that means we're going to keep the first 2, skip the third one, keep the first 2, skip the third one. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what that result is. So you can see PH, space, space, and then EM. And last but not least, how do we reverse a string? What if I wanted my entire string to be backwards? There's actually a very easy notation to do this. It combines the fact that we can use the negative indexing and using the colons to specify going from the beginning all the way to the end. So in order to get the reverse of my string, we can start at the 0th index, which we can just specify it as a blank, go all the way to the end, which again is specifying as a blank, and then with a step of -1, meaning that we are going all the way from the beginning all the way to the end, but going backwards by 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this prints out. We get the exact opposite, right? We ended with a exclamation point, but in this case, exclamation is first, and then E, and then M, and so on and so forth, all the way till the end here, which is P, which is the beginning of your string. This is a short notation to use when you want to reverse a string.